We spoke about where our chicken comes from, right? So it's the same thing, right? You and I, as Muslims, because we are so heightened with our consciousness of halal chickens, right? Halal food, halal meat, that we know somebody slaughters it. So we are sort of desensitized from the idea of slaughtering. By the way, if you slaughtered your own meat, you would be eating a lot less meat because it's a lot of work. Right? By the time you slaughter one chicken, get the feathers out, get the things from the inside, get it all cleaned up and bring it to the pot, it's a lot of work. Right? A lot of work. And now imagine a sheep or something like that. Once you slaughter enough for your family, you will know that you don't want to be returning to the farm for a long time. You'll find any excuse. You will start to eat Brussels sprouts very quickly. Right? But we are desensitized because we do have this kind of an idea that meat have to be slaughtered. Animals have to be slaughtered for us to have meat. But very fast, that is being eroded from our children. And I spoke about that as to how important it is for our children to experience as to where our food and indeed the meat actually comes from. But you see, in the same analogy, you and I are not desensitized because we don't think about it, that this particular avocado or this box of rice or packet of rice or chocolate, etc., is coming because somebody is dying. Forget about an animal being slaughtered. So imagine if you went to that farm and see what is in fact happening. Is that what is needed for us to change? That would be too late, because for most of us, we will never be able to get there. So understand this. Understand it's the same situation. We talk about how animals should be slaughtered in a humane manner, and we use the term humane. But when it comes to human beings, we are completely oblivious to it, and we are not actually concerned of it. And that's a problem. So we need to move away from not only non-ethical sources, but into ethical sources, but also in terms of quantity. So we have to take what I'm about to show here with a large grain of organic salt. So here is a progression of how human beings eat, and by awakening to consciousness of the reality of food, there will be a pathway by which you will in fact go in order to ultimately, inshallah, for ourselves, enter into spiritual eating. Without going through these steps, it may be very difficult. You, for example, cannot turn to spiritual eating from just tomorrow. You have to progressively do so. And if you follow this pathway, each step will actually lead you to reduce your food intake as well. And gluttony is not obesity. Simply because you're skinny, 65 kilogram, muscled, does not necessarily mean that you're not gluttonous. Because you could be keeping that shape that you've got through gluttony by eating so much of, food that you think it's all healthy. And, this whole idea of 500 grams of chicken. Do you need 500 grams? All right, so gluttony here is overeating. Eat to your local season. Not the season of Puerto Rico. Your local season. The way this entire environment, when you are here, we are travelers, so that's slightly different, but it does affect us when we travel. Anyone who travels a lot knows. I'm a witness to that. When you travel a lot, you know how food and weather actually affects your health terribly. So I'm speaking about being a resident in a location. Traveling is not a great blessing. It's a blessing to be able to go and see things if it was in small amounts. But to constantly travel is not good for you. It's not good for you spiritually. So eat to your local season. Understand that foods that actually grow in winter in the southern hemisphere are not the foods that grow in winter in the northern hemisphere. The northern and the southern hemisphere foods are different. In the northern hemisphere, the weather is, my understanding is wet. In the southern hemisphere, it's actually dry. Seeds behave differently, and therefore the way it actually brings about nourishment into the fruit or the vegetables it actually comes from, it ultimately gives you, is different. So simply because you live in Australia and you come from, say for example, Turkish eating habit in Australia is problematic. We are concerned for people in faraway lands, yet we are not concerned for the people who are the custodians of the land that we find ourselves in. And our indigenous people can teach us about the local food. First and foremost for our outward health, and without a doubt for the inward and the spiritual health. Have some concern for your indigenous people. If you're in the United States, you need to know about your, I just came from Knoxville in Tennessee, and to know about the Cherokee people, it is a moving experience. To walk on the land of these great honorable people, in the land where I come from, to understand the culture, the tradition, and the customs, the adat of the people of the Aboriginal background is incredible. You know, the Maori people of New Zealand have literally what we call 99 names of Allah. They have the majestic, the one and only, the provider, the nourisher, etc. Just at the theological level, they have so much to teach us. Yet we are entering into lands as if we are boss, which itself is a manifestation of our arrogance. And we know that arrogance has no place in Jannah. So, as we have spoken about yesterday about the 4 virtues, these things are a reflection and a manifestation of who we are. And our heedlessness of our own selves is heedlessness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just like knowing yourself is knowing your Lord, heedlessness of yourself is heedlessness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your proof is in your own pudding. So just look at yourself and how we are aware of the environment around ourselves. And without a doubt also, this is also the time in the world of ethical eating, you will also look at suitable nourishment rather than kind of populist diets and things like that. You are now really thinking about how does our body nourish ourselves. And from satiation to ethical eating, by default, your actual intake of the amount of food will also reduce. For you to eat ethical food, you will be driven to eat less food. And Imam Zayd, Hafidhullah, his statement, that when somebody says that, organic food might be too expensive, is one of those examples. That by eating ethical food, you will buy less. Just at the level of cost. Putting aside that ethical and organic food actually fulfills you much better. Try eating an organic apple. You better have strong teeth. That's the reason why our supermarket apples are soft, because our teeth have basically gone so soft that if you were to actually bite into an organic carrot or into an organic apple, you better have strong teeth. In fact, in many cases, our young children today might not be able to eat an organic apple because it is not as succulent and like it's more like, sorry to make all those sound effects. We then move on to, once you enter into ethical eating, you will notice that there's an awakening in yourself. If you don't eat ethical, and this has been the core part of my presentation, if you don't go ethical, in fact, you can miss the nutritional step completely, because in ethics is a strong level of nutrition. It's true, stable nourishment. You need to have the right knowledge to move forward with this. This knowledge does not come from, Sheikh Google or Cosmopolitan or Men's Health magazines. And that knowledge must come from our Islam, from our deen, and much of that is in fact available. And this is purely a window to this knowledge. And inshallah, we have the capacity and the ability to seek more of this knowledge. Say Ameen. The other element, so you have the reduction of food amount, halal and tayyibah. You will enter into a world of shukr. And we will look today the details of being in a state of gratitude. That our state as to how we are consuming food and other consumed material is a proof that we are not in gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, if you are in gratitude, He will increase you. But if you are ungrateful, then wait for the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And lastly, in the spiritual world of consumption, you understand the meaning of this world. As the noble sister said, means to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, detachment from this world. In other words, zuhud. Zuhud is where we want to get to, where we are detached from this world, we're understanding the purpose of this world and therefore engaging it in that manner. The next thing I wanted to speak about, how many of you over here have heard about eating by your blood type? You might want to do more research on this and understand a lot more about this. And there is a very good, by the way, I think it's an app on my phone. Let me just check this. It's called Diet for Blood. Oh, here we go. Yeah. So you have this this app which tells you about your type A, AB, B, and O blood types, and you can go into whatever your type of blood is. It tells you what beans are good for you. For a person who is in type A, and we'll be looking at it in a moment, not all beans are good for you. For people who are in a certain blood type, coffee might not be good for you, tea might not be good for you, etc. And the research shows that in our body we actually have what is called lectins, and these are kinds of proteins, and 95% of the proteins are able to be dealt with by the body. But there's this 5% of the proteins, which lectins, which actually carry with it a certain level of toxins. And once they get into the blood type, that's the time when we start to have what is called sort of mutation of what actually is happening in your blood cells, and therefore disease starts, right? Because the blood type is unable to deal with whatever proteins are actually coming in there for it to be distributed through the body. And this is the key start point of much of our diseases, and without a doubt, our health itself, even though disease itself might not be present at any particular time. And health will in fact then degenerate. So let's look at, this is just a brief example. What you're going to see in front of here is purely an example for you to understand the concept, and inshallah you can go and do some further research and also learn about this. And I would ask you to go to your naturopath and understand the kind of food that would be suitable for you. So you will give me time, right? Because I just realized I haven't put my time frame on. Jazakallah khair, alhamdulillah. So let's look at blood type A. For people who are in blood type A, some of the benefits, for example, are lentils, but not necessarily all kinds of green beans. For example, kidney beans are not good for you in type A blood. Coffee, in fact, for type A blood is good, but black tea is not. Goat's milk is good for you, but not cow's milk. In fact, cow's milk is probably the least healthy of food, of milk that we would actually consume. To the extent, remember, we had mentioned that milk should not be, in fact, consumed on a daily basis, because it's not really made for our body to be consumed on a daily basis. There are books written about it. In fact, you can actually go to Amazon and search for blood type personal living. And it tells you it gives you an entire book of your blood type and recipes. Blood type and personal living. And there are, I think there are 4 books. Actually, I think there are 5. One is specifically for each blood type, and the 5th one is on just general diet, to just to start off in relation to blood type diets. So type AB, red beans are good for you. Green tea and yogurt is good for you more than milk. In other words, a type AB person should actually reduce their milk, but actually have more of yogurt. What is harmful for you is kidney beans, as opposed to for other kinds of beans, black tea and cow's milk, similar to blood type A in that regard. Type B blood, as opposed to, for example, type A blood, in which case in type A, kidney beans are not good for such people. But for type B blood kind of a person, kidney beans are good. Harmful for type B blood is lentils, coffee, and cheese. To the extent where some of these kinds of food are the result of things like asthma in people, So dairy foods in children, because of the incongruence of the blood type to the food, can exasperate the situation of asthma. Not only so-called cordial and stuff like that. That's the kind of, those are good things to avoid. But it's a kind of a fad, populist information. Don't drink cordial. Don't take artificial sweeteners. That should not be in our diet in the first place. Right? So you almost move from, cordials, for example, this concentrated cordials, and then you actually just move into a kind of a juice which is not even fresh. And if you check that out in your blood types, that might be worse for your child than good, and potentially even for yourself. In terms of type O blood, type of people should actually move more towards seafood diets than meats. And in all cases, meat should be reduced anyway. So dieting by blood type is something we ourselves as Muslims in Islam, there is a tradition of. So those who are trained in Tibb Nabawi know these things. And you have heard Shaykh Hamza Yusuf, who have often referred to temperaments. There are 4 kinds of temperaments, Safrawi, etc. And they are related to your blood type and a few other things by which you behave, as well as how your body behaves with what you put into it in terms of food. So in Tibb Nabawi, this is learned, and we have this tradition. This is not a new thing, although today there's a lot more information for us to know from. And therefore, the people who are involved in naturopathic medicine and naturopathic lifestyles and well-being, they can give you very good advice about this. But if you can find somebody who is authorized in Tibb Nabawi, one person I can recommend to you, and you should search this on your computer and make dua for this great teacher and scholar of our time, and that is Sidi Hakim Ashuleta. Hakim Ashuleta, Archuleta. So the Hakim Ashuleta is one of the very few Western, if I could say, peoples who are trained. My understanding is right here in Turkey, and that's the reason why he's called Hakim in prophetic medicine and prophetic well-being. His website will give you his direct contact number, email, and you can in fact email him, and he can actually advise you. He'll obviously consult to you. So I mean, he's obviously doing this as a vocation. So you make sure that you look after him. He's a very wonderful and humble person. So don't take advantage of so-called free advice. You go to a naturopath and a doctor, you make sure you pay your hakims as well. Otherwise, you will not have a hakim around you. And then the only thing we'll be left with is the hikmah of them being available in the past. So, but naturopaths are very well attuned to this advice, to this science, and they should be able to give you some very good advice about this, inshallah. You all should have a naturopath. How many of you have a doctor? That your regular doctor that you go to? You don't have a regular doctor that you go to? Did you just go to any doctor? Really? It's like a medical center open, you just walk in? Is that what you do? So how many of you actually have a regular doctor that you go to? Okay. Most women, most males, has probably like, what do you mean a doctor? Don't you just tie a tooth onto a doorknob and just pull it? Alhamdulillah. No, you should actually have a regular doctor. Similarly, you need to actually have a regular naturopath who can give you advice about these things. But please make sure that simply because somebody looks all hippie, and don't just take them as your naturopath doctor. For example, in Australia, there are people who do hijama, the cupping, and you say to them, so when do you do cupping? And they say, it's okay, we can do anytime you want to. When that in fact is not the tradition, that is not the science. Cupping is done on particular days, particularly the white lunar days. So just don't go to anybody. Make sure that simply because somebody's concocted some things in their kitchen and the bottle looks green does not mean they are actually a naturopath, all right? That green might be just something that's gone off. Alhamdulillah. So I'm going to give you advice over here as a very small set of food items that if you just did this as a minimum and shift your paradigm in relation to food, These few things will change your life. At least from a physical health perspective, number one. And number two, from the perspective of you being able to have the energy to do your worship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also to have the energy to do amal salihat after your work. So you don't come home all tired. You still have the energy to actually move forward to do a lot more, inshallah. First and foremost, you must reduce all refined, processed and animal-based foods. Meat should be reduced. But if you can eliminate, not necessarily, meat should not be eliminated, by the way. It's our tradition, it's a prophetic tradition, and meat, we don't say that should be eliminated from your food, but you should reduce it, and you need to source ethical food, meat in that regard. Don't ask me where to get it from, okay? That's your job to go and research in your own communities. But eliminate refined food, and I'll speak about that in a minute, and processed food. Firstly, milk. Remove from your diet all processed milk. You must make sure that you can go back and find organic milk. Even if it is pasteurized, in most Western countries you will not be able to get non-pasteurized milk. The reason for that is entirely political, entirely a whole amount of hullabaloo, if there's such a word like hullabaloo, meaning that what the industry has done is because their cows are so sick that they need to pasteurize milk, they have made it into law that all milk must be pasteurized. So this idea that organic milk also should be pasteurized is really not the way to go. Although you have to be careful because cross-contamination does actually occur if farms are right next to each other. So pasteurized organic milk is the second best thing. And if you're lucky in your communities, I hope I don't get in trouble for advising this. If you're lucky in your communities, you could find a non-pasteurized milk. Most likely, if you are cluey enough to find it in your community, connect with the organic people in your community, and you most likely will find it sort of coming from back doors. The second way to actually get your hand onto a non-pasteurized and organic and non-homogenized milk is potentially actually entering into cow share, which is not easy in most parts of the metropolitan world. Cow share is where you buy a share of a cow, and the farmer will actually deliver to you milk. But you have to check this out properly. You don't walk into any farms, check these kind of things properly so you know you're actually getting from a very verified source. So make sure you move to organic milk. Stay away from pasteurized milk and supermarket milk. Definitely stay away from what's called HTST milk. The idea is basically there's a high temperature treatment and a very quick cooling down process, which is called HTST milk or UHT milk, ultra high temperature treated milk. You know those cans of milk. Why do you think they last you 6 months? Because there's nothing in it. There's nothing alive in it. The only reason why things go off is because there's something alive in it. Right? That's the reason why. Why is it actually, industry milk does not turn into yogurt? Because it's dead. I had an experience, inshallah my wife is not watching this, but she probably is, I don't know. Assalamu alaikum. So I'll use this example. One day it just happened coincidentally that she had gone and bought broccoli from a normal supermarket, and she was rushing, and that's what she did. Normally she actually buys organic, mashallah. And coincidentally I actually had bought the organic broccoli myself. And we both actually had that, our broccoli in the fridge. It so happens that my organic broccoli in front of us within 3 days, it's gone. It just shrinks and it's gone. And her supermarket broccoli continued to live for 2 weeks. So she asked me a question. She goes, well, shouldn't we be eating the supermarket? Because you actually look at it, it's preserved. So I look at her for a little while and I said, why do you think your broccoli actually is still alive, looking alive? It's because it's full of chemicals. The organic one dies because it's just a living thing and it decomposes naturally. The other one is full of pesticides and preservatives in it, and it gives you a longer so-called shelf life. Don't fall for shelf life. It is the food of lazy people, and laziness is friendship of shaitan.